Hello there. Once again, I'm the tailor, James Lee McFarland, also known as Gentleman Jim.
And I'm Victoria Baylor. I'm the illustrious host with this talented man. I'm a professional dressmaker, so I am the dressmaking half of our show.
Well, now, this show is going to be dedicated to you guys out there, you home sewers. Now, that's a phrase that I don't like.
Now, why don't you like that phrase, Mr. Jim?
Well, because it sounds like that's all you guys do is sew at home. We want to give you an insight on the tailoring end of sewing and
The dressmaking end. So this show is actually going to be pretty cool. This is kind of our introduction show. So in this show, we'll actually kind of give a little brief history on tailoring and dressmaking. And then from there on, kind of give you an introduction to ourselves with kind of a little fun Q&A session. So you can kind of get to know us as hosts together. And then from there on out, we'll discuss the giveaways. Because as you know, with the inaugural show, we have lots of things to give away. Right, Mr. Jim?
we sure do. You just stay tuned. Now, if you don't stay tuned and you miss out, just say, oh, shucks, I missed that one there. But once again, my name is James Lee McFarland. I was born and educated in New York City. I'm the brother from Harlem with the high school education.
Very popular phrase he uses around here. Now, we always kid Mr. Jim in saying that he didn't have exactly a traditional high school education like most of us did. His high school specifically touched on the ins and outs of the garment industry. So he actually had a first-hand experience doing that before most of us even knew what it was. So we'll talk about more of that later in his Q&A session. But to get started, let's just talk a little bit about tailoring and dressmaking. And Mr. Jim and I had an interesting conversation about this earlier. A lot of people don't know the difference between tailoring and dressmaking. And I would love for Mr. Jim to actually give his insights about what tailoring means to him.
Tailoring is the intricate part of sewing. Now, a tailor isn't necessarily a better sewer than a dressmaker. It's just that we still do the things the way the industry was designed. We still put in a lot of substance in garments that they stopped doing now. Now, that doesn't make me a better sewer than a dressmaker. It just means that I use more things in construction of my garment.
And isn't that crazy to hear a master tailor with 50 plus years, 54 and over?
54.
54 years of experience actually say, hey, I don't really sew better than the average person. So I think that, if anything, is, well, aside of course his humility, because we know he's super talented. But in addition to that, I think that does convey a good thought, Mr. Jim, correct? Because a lot of sewers actually tend to create this hierarchy between, oh, I'm just a dressmaker, or I just sew, and then that's a tailor. But the truth is, I think he underlined it very well. Tailors just have various methods that actually give them kind of the upper hand in a sense when it comes to creating structure and when it comes to molding and sculpting fabric for the body. So that's why we definitely need him. He is an integral part to actually bring all that knowledge to all of us, myself included. So I think that was a really great definition of what you feel tailoring is. As far as I'm concerned, dressmaking is kind of pretty straightforward. I don't really have an elaborate definition for it. I kind of see it as just constructing fabric, cutting it out, knowing how to fit very well, and create clothing for people, for yourself, for whomever. So that's kind of my idea of dressmaking. Do you have more of an elaborate definition?
Well, that's true. I look at dressmakers. I call dressmaking the flowy part of sewing, because most of the time the dressmaker makes a garment that flows.
That's
Whereas
true.
in tailoring, we make a more structured garment that has a unique shape and fit to it.
Very true. And that is I think that's a really great distinction between the two of them. And that's the real excitement I find personally with sewing dresses or, clothing in general. I love the tailoring aspect, and I like when you can connect tailoring with dressmaking because I think you can make fantastic garments. But it is cool to make that, flounces and cute flowy little things and stuff like that. So that's the real cool part of dressmaking. Very true.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think hopefully you have a better idea of kind of the distinction between tailoring and dressmaking. You think we kind of did a decent job
That's a
outlining
good one. That's a good one. That's
Okay.
a good one.
Great.
That's a good one.
So I think it'd probably be a good idea to go ahead and move on with our Q&A session. Why not get to know us a little bit better? We're fortunately, and I hope you consider it an honor, we're going to be in your faces for several weeks, actually over the next year, bringing you bi-monthly shows. So why not get to know us? Now, you might have a good handle on us. Most of you already know this gentleman from his wonderful blog, Find Tailoring by Jim.blogspot.com. Got a little stuck there. So you might know him from there. And of course, he has a famous Facebook page under the name Gentleman Jim, where he shares all his videos and tips. And he also has a YouTube channel. Anything else about your social media endeavors?
Well, we have a new show called The
Tailor
Tailor and
the Dressmaker. That we do. And in addition to that, I am a blogger as well. Some of you might know me from 10,000 Hours of Sewing. And the whole premise behind that blog is my pretty much expedition to become an expert sewer and just chronicling my adventures, my sewing, my time, to actually bring that to pass, which is my goal. So, okay, so I think we're ready for Q&A.
We can do that.
Okay, let's do some
We can
Q&A
do that.
here. All right, Mr. Jim, do you want me to start off?
You can start off.
Let me start off interviewing you. This would be my honor and pleasure. Also, I failed to mention Mr. Jim is actually my mentor. So I'll get more into that a little bit later. So I've learned a ton from him, so I think it's really cool to be able to interview him. Okay, so first question is, when did you start sewing?
I started sewing, like I said. I was blessed to grow up in New York City, which was the heart and the capital of the garment industry. I went to the High School of Fashion Industry in Lower Manhattan. Now, the High School of Fashion Industry was a school that was designed in the early 1900s. It was originally called the Central High School of Needle Trades. It was a high school that was designed to prepare its students for the garment industry, so that when they finished this high school, they could go to work. When I finished my courses at the High School of Fashion Industry, and I went out into the world of sewing. Now, at that particular time, there had to be 500 or 600 jobs available to me at that particular time. So, if I didn't particularly like a job or they didn't like me, I could merely go to another floor in the building and get a job, just like that.
And that's right out of high school.
Right out of high school.
Oh, people don't
Right
have
out.
it as lucky nowadays.
No, but it's kind of the way it is. But I'm so blessed.
Absolutely.
I'm so blessed that the school offered so much.
Awesome, man. And then the garment industry, it was highly impacted then. I know a lot has changed, and I know we're going to do a show specifically on that, so get excited. Mr. Jim will tell you all those wonderful insights. But how do you, as far as today's view of that, the school is still around, do the students still have the same opportunities?
They have, no, I'm going to be very honest with you, they don't. The school still teaches to make them the best sewers, the best designers, both graphic and, I guess you could say, with the pen. It still offers that. The school doesn't offer the tailoring part like it did for me. That school at that particular time offered not just tailoring, both men and women, taught you how to make shoes, taught you how to make fur coats, taught you how to make foundation, undergarments, taught you millinery, it taught you upholstery. These things they don't teach anymore, and that's a shame.
So you got a full suite of just skill sets, which is why you can do a lot of upholstery work and stuff like that nowadays.
Right. Because see, I saw it firsthand. Now I didn't necessarily take the courses, but I saw it firsthand because your homeroom class was always one of these workshops. So I got to see it. I got to see the working process, and when you learn how to sew, you can figure it out. It's all about figuring it out.
That's true, and that will definitely be a really good future course. And we could talk all day about figuring it out. You're
Yes.
absolutely right.
Yes.
So let's move on to the next question. What do you like when it comes to sewing? What do you gravitate specifically toward?
Well, I'm kind of a vintage guy. When I say vintage, all my life I grew up in a time when men were men and they wore tailored clothes. So I like to look tailored all the time. So I stay away from only because. Now that doesn't mean through the course of my life in this industry, I've made wedding gowns, I've made children's clothes, I've made this for women, this, that, and the other. Now I would prefer to do the structured part of it. Tailored women's clothes, tailored men's clothes there. So that's kind of where I am. I'm a vintage guy. My line is called Vintage New, which means vintage styles but new clothes.
Oh, nice. Oh, probably like even a new spin, your spin on those kind of clothes.
Right, absolutely.
Because you do have your own distinct style.
Absolutely.
Okay, so what's your expertise? I think the moniker or name Master Tailor pretty much tells us, but go ahead and outline it.
Right now, I'm focusing my expertise on the teaching of this. I've become a great teacher. There are a lot of good tailors, but they can't give it back. So if I would say that the best thing that I'm doing now, I mean, my sewing is my sewing. That's not going to change. But being able to give back my knowledge to those who really are seeking the tailoring look at it. They're not necessarily looking to become tailors. They just want to know, what do we do? How do we do it?
Very good. Yeah, and that does uncover a lot of the mystery. And kind of like you said, going back at the beginning, that tailors aren't that much different from dressmakers. I'm sure a lot of your viewers have just exhaled drastically.
Oh yeah, they all think it's so different. It's not. It's the process of sewing that we use that's a little different. But if you can sew and you digest the process of the sewing, it becomes very easy, because all I get from all of my students and emails is the aha moment. Well, I didn't know it was that easy. I get this all the time.
And, being trained the way I was trained, kind of more self-taught, and then connecting with you, I can definitely confirm what he's saying. It's interesting. I had all these misconceptions about how tailors went about doing things, even simple things from the inside color of the thread, like in a pair of slacks. There were times where everything had to be matchy-matchy, and Mr. Jim would say, no, it coordinates, use it. And so things like that I think sometimes we have entrenched in our brain, we kind of break those because those become barriers. All right, Mr. Jim, let's move on to the next question.
Come on with it.
I got it for you. How long did it take you to get good? And I think this is a question everybody wants to know the answer to. You've been doing this 54 years. Out of those 54 years, when did you hit that level of expertise?
My second year in high school.
I bet you weren't expecting him to say that.
No, but what happened was that the foundation that they laid the first year, the methods, all of the exercises that they gave, they stressed certain points. You have to do this, this, and this. I'm going to briefly tell you what it was, but I'm not going to elaborate on it.
Because that's the next show, right?
Absolutely.
Next show. We can't give away all the goodies now.
Straight stitching, zippers, and pockets. That was it. But I mastered those. And I got so good that I outperformed the teacher in certain operations. Now, I wasn't a better tailor than him, but there were certain operations that I picked up so quickly that he asked me, teach the young brothers.
So what you just did, which is really eye-opening, and again, we're going to cover all of this next show, is that you've pretty much condensed sewing down to operations, which I think we all know that. But what we tend to do is, especially as a dressmaker, we tend to get caught up in different types of garments. And we tend to give expertise or assign that to people that have done tons of different style garments, have done all this type of sewing, but really the basis and foundation of sewing is sewing well. And then that's what you're talking about here. And you managed to do that within your second year.
My second year.
In this
my second year in school.
Really good. Okay, so if you think about it, so I'm gonna ask a question. Actually, it's not even on our card because now you got me wondering.
Okay.
So when you get those kind of fundamentals and you get them early, how, and definitely let our viewers know, how does that shape your sewing going forward? So you get these good foundation and then you take off. How does that impact one's sewing career?
Now, if you get those three things, you have to always remember, and this is a phrase that I use now, when you take those three things, all you do in sewing from that point on is wrap a garment around those three things.
Wow. So it's just nonstop repetitiveness.
That's it.
And
That's
the
it.
reason I'm saying it that way is I don't think a lot of people that sew stop to think about that. What we see is the totality of a package. We don't see the breakdown of the operations. Hey, all I have to do is sew side seams straight, of
That's all
course.
it is.
And I love what you said, especially when I first met him. Even sewing on the curve is straight. Because if you have a seam allowance, it's parallel to the seam allowance.
Absolutely.
So it might curve, but it's straight.
Absolutely.
So I think you've just
Absolutely.
kind of debunked a lot of the problems that, and a lot of the misconceptions people have about sewing. Very, very great, Mr. Jones. So with that, let's just talk about what is your biggest advice to sewers?
Just continue sewing, but you have to sew repetitively. You can't sew today and skip 2 or 3 weeks.
I totally agree.
Because everything in life is repetition. And the old saying is what? Practice makes perfect. But you can't practice today and a month from now pick up the practicing again and expect to be any better. You don't have to sew every day if you can, but you have to sew constantly enough to where you get the feel. Sewing is about a feel.
Oh, it sure is.
Of-
Preach it.
Of everything. It's about a feel. It's not necessarily, well, I'm just sitting at the sewing machine. These are your biggest assets, your hands. Feel, the way you put the fabric through, the way you turn it to the side, the way you move it forward. It's all about the feel. Once you get the feel, it's just like driving a car. When we first start, we're all over the road. But then we get the feel of it, and we start to, listen to me, it's about guiding it, not steering. Too many times, a sewer will try and steer the garment.
That's very true.
Guide it, that's all.
Very true. Very true. I love that. And I love the fact that you elaborate on the feel. I think it almost, at least the way I think about sewing, I kind of equate it to generating this instinctiveness on how to deal with different types of textiles. It's really cool. You're absolutely right. And a lot of times, I remember you and I had a conversation about this. It was kind of fun. We always have these really cool conversations, but I like the fact that you mentioned that you kind of can't teach that. And I really do agree with that. You kind of can't you can teach the skill of the operations, but it's in the sewing that I actually think that you actually get all that extra stuff. And that's the experience and all the other stuff that helped catapult you to where you were. But as you said, you started with being really good your second year, and then from there, he's who you are today. So really good, really good. So the next question is, what is the biggest challenge you see most sewers face?
More or less self-confidence. I hear this all the time. They tell me, I'm just not good enough. Or I get to a point where I don't know what I'm going to do next. Well, the reason is because you haven't mastered the mechanics. If you master the mechanics, you shouldn't have a challenge. You really shouldn't. When you learn how to sew well, your confidence builds. There's nothing greater than to take a piece of cloth and create something out of it and look at it and say, that's very, very good. 54 years later, I'm still saying that. Every time I make something, I praise myself. I praise myself every time I make something. I say, boy, that's good. That's good. And I give myself a thumbs up. But the biggest thing, like I say, would be the self-confidence that they have, that you have. So let's get down with it. Get that confidence up. Because I tell all of my students, when you get good, the world knocks on your door. When people say, I can't do this and I can't, that's because you're not good. So it's up to you to get better.
Absolutely. And a good house is built on a good foundation.
Absolutely.
That's where it starts. So I'm just getting a little bit, I don't want to give anything away about next course or our next show, but yes, please stay tuned for that. I can't plug that enough. But we're going to have some really good stuff for the next one dealing with foundations. So what is your biggest epiphany when it comes to sewing? Your biggest aha moment?
Well,
Oh, I'm sure you've had several, but feel free to
yes,
share.
but the greatest one was I didn't realize how many sewers didn't know some of what I call the simple things in sewing. I'll be very honest with you. When people say, I didn't know you could do it that way, my thing was, I didn't know any other way to do it. That's only because the foundation that was laid for myself when I got into the industry, I learned from the great masters of Europe. I'm going to tell you about that story later on. But the great masters of Europe taught me what the garment industry was based on, and that's what I talk about, the foundations that I have. And they drill that into me. Well, now that I'm learning that a lot of so-called home sewers didn't get that, self-taught, grandma taught them, auntie taught them, this person taught them, who were also self-taught. So it was like a generation after generation of people, not saying that they couldn't sew, but they didn't have the little guidelines that I was blessed to have. See, I did get it. I was not self-taught. It was not my grandmother or my auntie that taught me. I learned from the great masters who set it all up. Now, if you get that, it's like a building block. You can't build a house or anything without schematics. That's your blueprint. Well, I was blessed to get the blueprint from them. So now I'm passing on the blueprint to you guys. So that was my biggest thing. I had no idea how much people didn't know. Not that they couldn't sew, but just the little things. Why you don't know that? I would say to myself. Why you don't know that?
And then that goes back to what we first talked about, the difference in tailoring and dressmaking. There's a lot of methods that, that don't appear in the old school Simplicity or Vogue books because they're pretty much methods just primarily for tailors. So you didn't get, a lot of that didn't circulate. So I think it's really great we have Gentleman Jim to kind of give us that information and fuse a lot of our educations with a little bit more of a different approach. I agree with him. It's not like people have sewn well for years and they have some really neat techniques, but I think the greatest thing is when you find the best techniques in every field and you put them into your own sewing, it just elevates it. Would you agree, Mr. Jim?
Well, yes, because even what I was taught by the great masters, through the years, I improved on their system. I found easier ways to, we always hear the cliche of the end justifies the means. Well, to get to the end is nothing more than time. In this industry, time is money. So you want to expedite your method of from the time you begin to the time you end. And that's all I do. I break down on my DVDs, I say you should be able to do this in thus amount of time. Well, you should, because in industry, everything is based on time, because time is money.
That's true. That's true. And then there's and as we both would agree, there's a lot of different ways to do different things, but it's really great what we don't want you to get the wrong impression is, I think a lot of our sewing can be based on personality types too. So every sewer might have like methods they prescribe to. But I think it's really great to always learn and grow and get new viewpoints, because I can't tell you how many times I've done something a certain way and then I liked the way he specifically did it and I just was like, okay, nix my way, let me do it his way. So, and of course his personality, you might like something that another teacher might present. Everybody picks, and it's almost like a toolbox. I like to think about your own sewing toolbox.
Absolutely.
You like this, this. You put it together, and that's what makes us all unique as sewers. Yeah. And I love the fact that we'll move on to the next question. That you mentioned that even though you were taught by some of the greats out there, you found ways to improve even with that and just grow even more. So that's really good.
That's my thinking out the box. I'm not saying that my method is the only method.
They're really good methods.
It's good. It's good. But there are things that I have learned from others that I incorporate into my methods.
And your toolbox, I know, is chock full of goodies. Okay, so the next question is, what do you think is the biggest misconception sewers have?
The biggest misconception.
Yeah. What is their ideas, you know, that
well,
oftentimes misleading?
Is that you can get good up here.
Right.
Too many sewers like the glamour, like the glory, like the hype that sewing does.
Very true.
They do. Sewing is not a head trip. Too many sewers want the lights, the cameras, the action, the red carpet. Sewing cannot come from your head. It has to come from your soul, deep within your heart. When you connect that now with your head, that's how you get better. But everybody, oh, I want to learn how to sew. Oh, all my life I want to learn how to sew. Well, let me tell you something. I didn't. I never thought I'd be in this industry this long. Didn't go into this industry to be in the industry. I just wanted to make clothes. That's all. That's all. That was in my heart. So that's why I took it the way I did. Not to become Gentleman Jim, future man. It was just because I just wanted to make some clothes. But I got it in here. I didn't get it up here. My students come to me all the time and they say, oh, all my life. Not me. Not me. I didn't want to do this.
Yeah.
You know? So that's what it is. They think it rather than feel it. And it comes back to when you feel it, that feeling now equates into your hands.
And it becomes your passion. So what kept you in it then? Since
What
you didn't want to
me?
originally start there, you got in it.
Like I said, there was a lot of money to be made in it. I say this to say that in sewing, I've never missed a meal in my entire life. I've never been broke because when you get good, there's always something that you could do with your hands that allow you to, oh, I don't have any money today. Oh, you need that fixed? Oh, you need that made. Oh, how can I help you on that? It just always is.
The business of sewing.
The business. Yeah.
And then also I hear from that, not only having a great skill set, having passion in your heart, but also just even from you, and a lot of you might pick it up, having that confidence in your skill set to know you can go out and just forge a living. All right, Mr. Jim, and to round out this round of questionings. All right, we're almost at the end here. The most important, or probably one of the most important ones, who was your mentors?
My mentor was a gentleman named Ori Walls, and he had a tailor shop on 125th Street called Ori's Custom Tailoring. When I went to work for him, I was 20 years old, and he shaped me into the man that I have become. Not necessarily the sewer, because I had already mastered the sewing part, but he shaped me into the man that I became in the industry. He taught me the whole business plan of how the industry is ran. He showed me where all the connections of who did what, how they did it. He showed me the manufacturing part of it. Most of the time I was just the behind the scenes guy. I just worked. But with him, I got a chance to study and watch him. I watched the way he moved through the industry. The people that he knew now became my movers and shakers. He gave me all of his connections. So in turn, what I do now with my students is I give them all of my connection. I teach them not just how to sew. I teach them how the business is run, what to do, how to do it, where do you get this from, how do you do this, what's the next step that you should take. Be careful of this, look out for that. So he was a great inspiration for me. I wrote a book about my experience, which I dedicate to him because of the foundation that he gave me in business. You know, the book is called Across 125th Street, When the Magic Was Real.
I think we should showcase that. Let's grab a copy of that book real quick, because that is really important. Here you go.
Thank you. Yes,
Go.
This, as we all know, is the Apollo Theater. This man, Ori Walls, was Mr. 125th Street because during the time that I started working for him, we made clothes for 75% of all the acts that appeared at the Apollo Theater. So as far as
And then, wait, let's not glaze past that. By acts, we're talking about high-profile celebrities. Do you want to name a few? Or
well, I'm going to name a few.
You might know some of these people.
You might know some you might not, because this is the 60s. We made things. Now, understand, when I say we did work for them, we were not their exclusive tailor, because in those days, these people had tailors all over the country, but we were their New York or East Coast connection. But we did things for Duke Ellington, James Brown.
James Brown.
We did clothes for the Isley Brothers. We made things for Muhammad Ali. I've had the pleasure of making some things for Jackie Robinson. I've had the pleasure of meeting some of the great civil rights workers back then, Bayard Ruskin, A. Philip Randolph, who founded the Sleeping Car Porters, as well as a host of your rock and roll entertainers.
Now, I must ask, who was your favorite to sew for? And who had the most outrageous outfits? I know it was the 60s, so
Yeah.
the style was a little bit...
Yeah, well,
it was starting to head into some...
And
some
we
interesting
created
waters.
quite a few styles back then. To be very honest with you, the person that I bonded with the most was not the front runner. It was Billy Strayhorn. Billy Strayhorn was the musical director and producer of a lot of Duke Ellington's pieces. A-Train, those type of pieces. Because I had my closest bond with him. I had my best talks with Jackie Robinson. I had my funniest moments with Muhammad Ali. So I got a cross-section of music, sports, this one and that one. Had a lot of conversation with them. So it enabled me to write about them. But I owe it all to Ori Walls, who was my mentor, who showed me that these people were human.
That's right.
You know? But so I'd have to say he was it. I wasn't hung up on no other designers. Designers or branding was not a big deal in the 60s. You only had a handful of them that were branded. They weren't our clients because we were custom people.
That's true too. Which is still, there's always a market for custom. But that's a good point. And I think when we get to the show where you talk about the garment industry,
oh, I'm going to do that.
He will cover how it's changed drastically. You're right. It's all about designers and labels now. But you got to live in a time where it wasn't about that. It was just a focus mainly on the production of beautifully tailored clothing. So in a way, you kind of became your own celebrity. You know, even though you might not realize it then, you're a celebrity tailor to celebrities.
Okay.
Okay, so that wraps up our questionings with you, our Q&A session. You have anything else you want to add?
No, but I got a few questions I'm going to ask you.
Uh-oh.
Oh, here comes the dressmaker.
Uh-oh,
Here comes the dressmaker. Because they're kind of the same questions.
They are.
When did you get your start sewing?
Oh, that's a good question. I actually started sewing at the young age of 7, 8, around that time. My Barbie needed really nice, well-designed jeans, and I couldn't find them anywhere, so I would hand sew those for her. I did a lot of hand sewing then. And the interesting thing about that is I did it during a time when I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just making magic, which I think sometimes the best things are born out of that. I didn't use a sewing machine. I did it by hand. Fast forward, I think about to my senior year in high school, home ec was a requirement. It's not so much now, and sewing was a part of that. So I made pillows and that kind of thing. And then my sewing lay dormant for a few years. I was actually a crocheter and knitter. I did tons of that. And I used to go to fabric stores and look at all the crazy women around the pattern table, which is hilarious, because I'd see them when I'd be going to get yarn. And I would look, and I was just perplexed at how wildly they went through the pattern bins and the cabinets, grabbing patterns and grabbing fabric.
You guys have too many patterns.
They, well, guilty as charged. But it's funny, I'm one of those people now. But back then I didn't quite understand it. But then fast forward to 2004, I believe it was, or 2002, '04, my husband's grandmother passed away. Very beautiful woman. She sewed everything. I heard she sewed her curtains, her clothing, her undergarments. She was very skilled. And I acquired for my mother-in-law her 25-year-old new home sewing machine. It was ancient and it was heavy as a brick, or like maybe a pallet of bricks.
It still sews well.
It still sews well, and they don't make them like they used to. And I think it just actually recently got out of alignment, which is wham. I need to find somebody to fix it up for me. But I acquired that, and then I just started sewing for fun. I said, what would be a better way to commemorate her legacy, so to speak, to give her, kind of honor. She's a wonderful woman,
So
well
nice.
adored. And so then I started sewing, and then I kind of got bit by the bug and became obsessed. And then the rest is history.
Okay.
That's where I started.
That's how most of it started with you guys. And
That's
what
right.
do you like to do as far as sewing?
Well, I like to sew a little bit of everything outside of home decor. I've discovered I am not a fan of home decor sewing, so I like to avoid that outside of pillows. But I really love garments. I like making things for clients, and so I pretty much can sew most things for, especially women and children, and I can sew something for men. So.
Okay, so would that be your expertise, or is there one thing that you really zero in on?
Well, I really zero in on sewing special occasion wear. I love
right.
gowns,
Okay.
wedding gowns. I couldn't do those enough. I don't have enough under my belt. I'm just waiting for people to get married. I have a few scheduled for next year. And prom gowns, bridesmaids dresses. I just like things that flow and, fancy fabrics.
That's that flowy stuff I was talking about that I don't really get into.
I know, but I love that. And most people joke I'm a bit of a masochist because sewing for people, as you know, is a pretty challenging thing to do. It's not as easy as most people think. And I love I think I do it because I love the output. I love making people feel beautiful, especially women, because I know we're too hard on ourselves. We're very judgmental, self-critical. I think I guess my mantra always is there's no such thing as bad bodies, it's just bad clothes or bad clothing choices for the bodies.
I like that.
So you get into the right thing, you look great. So anyway, that's my gift out there.
So how long did it take you to get good?
That is a very good question. Unlike Mr. Jim here, I didn't have specialty training. I am primarily self-taught. And it's weird for some people. I think for me, that works for me. And it's odd I can say that because for me, when I started sewing, I had to dig. By nature, I'm a researcher. I worked in research science for 15 years. So for me, I think there's a certain amount of excitement in uncovering and discovering things. So when I first started sewing, I actually took like a little mini 6-month class at Hancock Fabrics just to get like the basics from my teacher. And then she marveled that I just started kind of along the lines like you. I started doing things outside the class. Like I just couldn't stay boxed up. So I would go home and I sewed every night, and that light in my sewing room was always on. But I just kept sewing and sewing and sewing around the clock, and then I would check out all the books in the library. So then when I got through all those, then I would go online and research new books, and then I'd get all those. And then I'd check out all the DVDs, and I'd buy DVDs. Essentially, I was out to gain as much information on the subject as I could, and I think for me, that was a really great approach because it helped give a foundation of, I like to learn a lot about something. It's hard for me to just streamline. I like to build a frame and then add the puzzle pieces and then get a bigger picture. And I think that process lent itself well for me. I would have loved to go to fashion design school. That would have been a straight shot. But I think for me, it was kind of neat taking the curvy road. So as far as getting good, that's a loaded question. I'm one of those weird people. I'm actually wired. Well, I always think that there's more to do before you get good. But based on the feedback of my clients, and I've been sewing for clients since I think '06, they've always been really pleased with my skill level. And I think I really, in the last couple of years, have felt like I've started getting really good. I'm odd like that.
She's very good.
I'm so
She
odd.
says she has more to go and a lot to learn, but she is very good for a self-taught person.
Thank you. And then what I will interject is, of course, foundationally being self-taught. But I think it really helped, especially when I met this gentleman about 3 years ago, because that for me helped to take all these fragments and give a lot of shape and structure to them, and to allow me to pick the things that were good that I had learned, and then to discount the stuff that I didn't need. So I think it really shaped my perspective on sewing. And that's the important part, I think, of mentorship. That's what it does for you. It helps to give you good perspective. So I hope I answered that.
All right, Miss 1,000 Hours of Sewing. Give me some advice that you would give sewers.
Sewing advice. Probably my best sewing advice kind of goes back to what you mentioned earlier. I think we should be kind to ourselves in the learning process. I find a lot of sewers get really overwhelmed. I being one sometimes, especially when you're first starting. You literally have to plan to fail. I hate to say it like that. Like, literally plan to fail, because that's what's going to happen, like, tons of time. Anytime you take on something new, that's usually what happens, but you have to persevere. I totally agree with Mr. Jim with that hit and miss sewing. That can't happen. Not if you want to be good. So my advice, if you want to be good, this literally has to almost become like a religion to you. You have to like practice. And I remember in my early years, that's essentially what I did. I think in anything you want to achieve, there's always that initial investment.
Mm-hmm.
And your initial investment really is time. It's time and pretty much your dedication to skills. And I remember when my friends would be running out, going to the movies and stuff. And it's not like I lived a dull life, but I committed a good portion of my time to sewing. And I always sewed, like, every day. And I would screw up a lot of stuff all the time. But the thing is, what you'll find is the more you do something, the better you get at it. And then the less screw ups you have. So really, for a lot of people, if you want to get in there and get good, jump in. Give it your all, but stay at it. You can't skip around. You have to be consistent. 3 hours on the weekends, you just got to decide what's important to you and go for it. So, and I know you can.
That's so true. So what was the biggest challenge that you see that most sewers face?
Well, I think they face the same challenges I faced when I first started sewing. I think it's understanding that sewing, and you and I talked about this earlier, sewing isn't just, to become good at making garments, you have to become good at two different separate things, sewing and fitting. And most people tend to forget, they just think that, it's all about sewing. Well, it has to fit well too. And those are really two separate, almost disciplines. Like, there's a lot you learn within each. Sewing is all the hands-on, the motor skills, using the right tools, the right equipment. There's a lot with that, but fitting actually is just as congested with information. There's body types, there's curves, there's vertical distribution, horizontal distribution, there's body shapes, there's like a ton to keep in mind. So when I work with clients, it's a mixture of all this information, and you're literally creating this formula to fit that one person. And if you actually have all the components of that formula, apply them well together, you end up with a great garment. So that's usually the biggest issue. Okay.
Remember what she said, apply them well.
Very well.
Now, that's a big word.
That is a big word. I always think of that as like the light bulb moments. And I think as a sewer, you have tons of them. So there's lots of them that happen. I think that one that sticks out for me is specifically that if you sew very well, people will gravitate toward that. And I think it's knowing why you're doing what you're doing. It's kind of going back to what you said, making it a heart matter. I think the greatest epiphany for me is that, I want women to feel beautiful. I want women to feel, that you're empowered, and clothing actually has a great power. I guess that's really my epiphany when I discovered clothing has the power to shape how you feel about yourself, how you exude yourself, how the confidence levels. And oftentimes when you're not feeling it, you put on the right garment, you know what I mean? And then all of a sudden you're like, power player, it's crazy. So I think when I discovered that clothing has a ton of power, to me it's really great to be a person that helps to produce something that can be so empowering for another individual.
That is a true statement. I've seen her work on people, and I've seen how it makes them feel. I've seen how a lot of people feel like they have everything in the world by just dressing the body temple up. Now, a misconception on this, in this garments, on sewing, what's a misconception?
Well, big sewing misconceptions. I think it goes back to what I said earlier. You're going to be good without actually putting in the time. That's a major misconception. I think that, and I've actually witnessed it with this gentleman, with his students, and I've had students, but I haven't had as many students as you had throughout your career. But one interesting thing I think we both can agree about students is oftentimes people come in with stars in their eyes. And you as a teacher can sometimes you can't tell at first, but then as they progressively begin to sew, you can see where their priorities are. They like the idea of being able to make something, but they're not willing to put forth the effort. Or I don't think sometimes they really realize what it entails. I mean, you're in your sewing studio putting 10, 12 hours into a garment, or especially if it's something really intricate. Mr. Jim puts like 30 minutes and, he's got something popped out.
Not really.
But I think people don't count up the cost, so to speak, and there's this misconception that you can become a great designer, a great sewer, without all this extra work and dedication. And that's unfortunate because oftentimes people walk away from the craft because of that. And I think the craft itself can weed out people very easily. You can tell where you're going to go or how far you're going to go based on what you're going to do. And when you don't really ante up and give it your all, then so many people with great talent just kind of fall off because they're just not ready to dedicate. So that's a big misconception.
That's so true. I used to feel hurt, failure, when I had a student that didn't get it.
He took it personal. He would. And I think good teachers do.
But then I realized everything is not for everybody. That's why I say you got to get it out your head and more into your heart. Now, was there someone, a mentor in your life, or someone who you really looked up to in this industry that really meant and burned something into your life?
Well, it's funny, when I first started being self-taught and all, I had a lot of virtual mentors. So there was a lot of people out there you might know of, like, Peggy Sagers from Silhouette Patterns. I love the Palmer and Plush crew. There's just so many great sewers out there, and I think my bookshelf at home pretty much testifies to who they are, the people that mentored me in that capacity. But it wasn't until I met you, Mr. Jim,
well, thank you very much,
that I had a concrete mentor, which is really good. And I think being able to look over, like you said about Ori, which is so important, actually being able to see the day-to-day operations on how someone conducts business, how they take on challenges, how they work through situations, some good, some bad. I think that's very important for growth. So I have to admit, the most inspirational and I think the most helpful mentor would definitely be you in that sense, because I've had you in the flesh. So and that's really important. If you don't have a sewing mentor, we'll definitely encourage you, please get someone. You can't, if you think about it, most people in life, great people, you never get that way by yourself. It's practically impossible. It's the wisdom of people with experience that pass it on to you that help you grow. So
that's good.
Yeah.
It's the Heavenly Father who created all man and womankind, who watches over all of us, not just sewers. But I give and I tell people all the time, when I look at my hands, I tell all of my students, they're not my hands, these are God's hands. I'm just a vehicle. So if you're not grounded in some kind of faith, now you call it whatever you want to call it, that's what makes us operate. I'm going to leave you guys with a saying that was given to me. It is not my saying. And I am the thinker that think the thought that make the thing. I'm going to leave you with that. Think about that.
That's a really great one, and we've talked about that before. All great things start where? They start
That's right.
here, and then they emulate out of here. So very true. Okay, so I hope you feel like you've gotten a chance to know us just a little bit more.
Yeah.
Do you feel a little cozier with our audience? Of course, we would love to get to know you, so we always welcome, emails. If you want to drop in some information on our Facebook page, a Tailor and a Dressmaker, feel free to do that.
Feel free.
Of course, subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Mm-hmm.
But we're going to talk about also our exciting giveaways.
Yeah.
This is the first show, so, we like to give. It's probably the best part of anything. So as we outlined in our little teaser video, we have lots of great stuff to give away. Mr. Jim, do you want to talk about some of your DVDs and stuff like that?
Well, yes. As you know, I've created 2 DVDs, hard ones. One, when I first did this one, and this is your basic, it says alterations. And I did that one only because there were so many challenges that people were having. But this one by itself gives a lot of the tips. Gives a lot of the tips that I talk about and that I teach.
And can I say real
Yes,
quick,
ma'am.
this is an exceptional DVD. Definitely, if you want to win anything, this is it. All of the stuff you want to win. But I like this. I have alterations business. And if you think of it, there's twofold. So there's alterations, changing things and making things fit. But you can also use these same techniques even when you're doing garment construction, because it's essentially the same thing.
Same thing.
So you're almost learning like his techniques in this video. It's 2 disc set, lots of great stuff.
Yes, it is.
Lots of great stuff.
That's one of them. When I first produced this one, I started getting testimonials from all over on what this did for them. And that really kind of sparked when I said I didn't realize how little people didn't know. It's not that they didn't know how to sew, but it's the technique. This is about technique. The second one is on making a pair of ladies' pants. Now understand, the only difference between ladies' pants and men's pants is the crossover of the zipper. Men's pants, we do a little extra in the waistband, and we do a little extra in the fly piece. But basically, if you could make this pair of pants for a lady, you can make a pair of pants for a man. These are just 2 of the ones that we produce. Now I have a lot of segments on Gumroad, which teaches you different things. You can give them a little more information on that.
So yes, as you know, Mr. Jim has gone from actually hard DVDs to virtual ones. We know a lot of people don't like to wait for things to be delivered, so they want to be able to download it now, instantly. So he has a Gumroad site, and of course the link will be, of course, on Facebook, and it is on his Facebook page. But we are giving away a couple of his teachings there. He recently went to Mimi G's Style Sewing Fashion Conference. I accompanied him, and it was awesome. He did a fantastic job teaching how to construct a tailored jacket. Well, we have that course, or it's a matter of PowerPoint course, and it has coordinating. I think we have some PDF worksheets to go with that. 9 videos to show the various techniques, from the way he puts in the shoulder, like a sleeve. I'm telling you, he does things a lot differently than what we normally are taught, which is pretty fascinating, which just, it adds to the ease of making a jacket. So we're going to give away one of those, and then we'll pick one of his other courses. Real popular one is the tailored vest. He's wearing one of his signature vests now, so that's a great one. Some other giveaways include, we have fabric, and I showed those in our teaser videos. We have tons of fabric to give away. Let's see. We have some guest patterns. Okay, and in addition to those great DVDs, we also have fabric also that I mentioned in the teaser video that we're going to be giving away.
That's
Lots
right.
of great fabric. Mr. Jim has some suiting fabric. We
sure
had bundles
do.
of those. I had
The good stuff.
the high quality wool stuff. And then, of course, I had a pile of some fabrics, and there's probably going to grow. We have a lot of the, like we mentioned before, the flowy stuff for dresses and tops and things of that nature. So a pile of those. We also have some guests who will be contributing to our giveaway. And I have with me, I had the pleasure of meeting Miss Mari Miller from Seamster Patterns. And she is hosting a Sewing Indie Month, and that's in the month of September.
No.
Did you know there was like a whole group of indie kind of sewing patterns?
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so a lot of people think, we always think the big four, Simplicity, Butter, Vogue. But, with the increase in technology, there's a lot of people producing their own patterns, which is really, really great. So, of course, Mari Miller, and I'm sorry, Mari, if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, she actually produces the Seamster Patterns, and she's heading up the Sewing Indie Month, which is in September. Currently, they're running a bundle sale. So she has teamed up with other indie pattern makers.
No kidding.
And there's about 10 of them, and they're going to have a bundle that's, I guess, currently on sale, and it runs through the 12th, I believe. So definitely I'll include that information on our Facebook page and on my blog, 10,000 Sewing Hours, because I will actually be making one of those patterns. But to kind of give you an idea, they're the PDF patterns. So here's one of them. This is called the Sutton Blouse by True Bias. This is actually the blouse I'm actually making. It's lovely. It's coming together so beautifully, and I'll post that on my blog, and you can get details from her. But she is also giving away her avocado hoodie, so I'll post that picture on our Facebook page. She's giving away several different sizes. This is Mari Miller. She's giving away her personal pattern, and then this pattern's by True Bias, which is a separate indie pattern company. So again, 10 patterns. Feel free to jump in, support those guys. A portion of the sales goes to charity, so that's always a good thing.
Oh, that's always a good thing.
Very good. And I think we covered all of the giveaway items. To find out more about them, we're just going to make it simple. Go to our Facebook page. So go to the Tailor and the Dressmaker on Facebook, like the page. There will be some instructions for you on how to enter the giveaways. You want to follow those instructions, correct?
That's it. That's it.
And we'll make it simple. And then this giveaway will run actually for about a month. That seems reasonable for you?
That's it. That's good.
Okay, so we'll do from about August 10th until September 10th. We want to get a lot of people in, and
okay. Don't miss out.
Don't indeed. But anyhow, that concludes today's show. It has been an extreme pleasure and honor.
It really is.
We appreciate you just letting us into your homes, your offices, wherever you're watching this. And please stay tuned. We have a lot of exciting topics, things coming up.
Got a lot to tell you guys, because I'm the tailor.
I'm the dressmaker. And we are here to just share insights, tips, news, anything. And then we love your feedback. If you have any ideas for the show, please let us know. Again, thank you very much, and we'll see you for next episode.
See you soon.
Bye.